Views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
This is the latest disclosure, a report from National Civil Defense Headquarters in Washington. It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder.
Wait a minute, something's happening. Humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror.
Welcome to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Tuesday night. That means it's time for Deeper Cuts After Hours AM. Deeper Cuts, that is. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me all the time is the awesome Mr. Greg Bakken. And we're going to take you into the world of the paranormal tonight, but a little bit different world. We're going to be talking with Shannon Bradley at the top of the next hour, and she is going to explain to us all about Bradley Byers, rather. I want to say her whole name, Shannon Bradley Byers, because it just really rolls off the tongue. Well, she's a paranormal genealogist. She is the debunker of haunted folklore, or in her case, fakelore. So she'll take us through and tell us why a lot of what we may know of history, especially a paranormal history, relating to the paranormal, may be all wrong. So that'll be top of next hour, be a lot of fun. And she just recently released a book, and Greg and I both have read the book. Great stuff, interesting book. And really, it does just do that. It knocks the covers right off what we think is true, right, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions that I come up with when I'm reading through all these very well-known locations. And it's like, well, so everything we've heard about and known about for all these years may not be exactly as what we heard. It's pretty incredible. Yeah.
So the book title, actually, the official book title, is Paranormal Fakelore, Nevermore, Real Histories of Haunted Locations. So, we're going to be talking with Shannon at the top of next hour, and you'll want to listen in on that and definitely weigh in on what you think. I mean, you guys always do, and we appreciate that. And again, we had a huge turnout. We are really, Greg, man, we are just destroying the old ratings books, man. People are tuning in. We love each and every one of you. Mainly, Greg, it's because we are one of them. We're fans of the paranormal, just like they are. And so we all get together every night, 3 nights a week, and we enjoy radio together. And again, you guys have really come out in droves to show love to us, so we want to show love right back to you. And thank you guys for allowing us to do what we do.
Well, and I have to echo that. Thank you very much. And the thing is, like, we're talking to folks like Shannon, who you're not going to always get on different shows and whatnot, and it's going to be, this is what she wrote is actually kind of controversial. So it's going to be nice to be able to talk with her, and it kind of, she can press us, we can press back a little bit, and we invite listeners to do the same, because a lot of this stuff is going to knock the stories that you know on its head in terms of what she's talking about with these locations. And anytime that someone writes something and you are questioning what you're reading, questioning what you know, that has to be pretty good, Joel.
Yeah, because it made me question as well, going, and these are really well-known cases, too.
I could hear you from Duluth, and I'm in Minneapolis. I could hear you go, and I could hear it, and you were processing
I was
it
pondering.
very loudly.
I was pondering. Now, Shannon was on the show about 3 years ago, and I proudly kind of bestowed on her the paranormal genealogist tag, which she's taken and ran with. Great lady, good friend, known her for years.
How much money have you made off of that?
You know what? Well, I've gotten a couple free books off of it, so
that's not bad.
Just saying,
probably more than you deserve.
More than well. Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much for pointing that out. Maybe it's a little more than I even deserve, but no, it wasn't for the money. It was for the prestige.
Right.
Okay, or the lack thereof, whatever. But hey, man, I know I got the email. Of course, Greg. Of course, he provides us for this show with all of the haunted headlines each and every week, and that's always brought to you by Minnesota Ghost Box. Now, if you're sick of normal paranormal programming, you know what I'm talking about, the normal running around the dark, going, scratch me, yeah, that kind of crap. If you're sick of that and you kind of maybe want to see something that's a little more down to reality, check out Minnesota Ghost Box. Not only do you get a great story, but you also get your paranormal investigation. But again, it's also a great story, so you get both in one. So if you're a sucker for a great story and the paranormal, that's the show you're going to want to check out over there on YouTube. Or you can go to minnesotaghostbox.org. Check out all of the videos, including from the Palmer House, the infamous soap factory there, and everywhere else in between. And there's new stuff coming out all the time. And I know Greg has also got some very big locations in the coming future in the works to be unveiled at a later date. So keep looking, keep watching, and tune into Minnesota Ghost Box right after the show. But that being said, where are we going first, Greg, in the old headlines?
Well, you know what? I like the dead, right? Obviously,
you do. You have a thing for the dead people.
Certainly agree with their beliefs and whatnot. And one piece that came across to me was 5 things you'll be surprised to know about contacting the dead, as described by a medium.
All right, then.
Right. And so you and I know a lot of folks who are very talented mediums. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not they agree with what we have to say here. But this is an article that we came across, and going to read it and kind of see where things go. Doesn't necessarily mean we agree with everything that's being said here, but it's a take, right, Joel? It's a version.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's always open for conjecture. I mean, what's going on, or different stories, or different thoughts, and this, that, and other thing. But the first one always made me ask this question. I'm glad it's being answered. Clothing is optional. Number 1, because I always wondered why every time you heard about haunting, there was always clothes on. They weren't born with clothes.
Well, as a friendly reminder, Joel, it doesn't mean you have to wear clothes when you contact them. Just keep that in mind, okay?
Greg, nobody wants to see this in the buff. I'm just throwing it out there.
That's where radio is our best medium, right?
Yeah, that is true. I have been told I'm a face for radio and a voice for print.
So number 1, clothing is optional. You might think that being a medium would mean and this is in the medium's voice, not my voice. A medium would mean I never have to deal with indecent exposure, but I'm beginning to doubt that assumption. When I first started doing readings, the spirits were all clothed and respectable. Then one day I saw a very large male sitting in a recliner without his shirt telling me about the heart condition he died from. A few weeks later, I was sharing messages from a woman's teenage son when he started walking the catwalk of my living room and posing in his boxers.
What?
The clothing a loved one in spirit chooses to give a message to the person I'm doing a reading for. They might appear wearing the same clothes they were wearing when they passed, or they might wear their favorite purple sweatshirt. They might choose their clothes to add humor to the reading or point out a physical characteristic like bulging arm muscles or a large stomach. I've yet to get to show a full nudity, but I have learned that loved ones who have passed will appear in their choice of clothing or lack of it.
Well, does the song "I'm too sexy for my clothes, too sexy for my clothes" ever start tuning up before she sees these people, so she has some idea that this may get a little risky?
And I wonder too if whether or not the lack of clothes that these spirits are wearing shows how comfortable they are with this medium.
Well, that's true. Maybe they're like, yeah, baby. I'm assuming it's a woman. Yeah, baby, I'm here.
I
but cool, yeah.
That's frightening, by the way.
That is.
Yeah,
that is.
That's yeah, that's
God, I just took that way too far. I did.
Yeah.
I did. I think I might have crossed the line there with the dead getting jiggy with it.
I don't mind the dead doing that. It's just, no offense, just you doing it was.
Oh yeah, that was bad, wasn't it?
I'm not gonna do it.
Oh God, yeah, no, yeah. You want to mind scrub that whole thing, and now you're like, oh, I cannot unhear that. Oh man.
No, that's gonna be with me for, and because I believe in what I believe in, not for the rest of my life, but eternity.
Eternity. And you know what? I'm gonna find you in the afterlife and go, "Zup, Greg? Remember that time when we were in the air?"
Now, just to be fair, though, Ken, we're going to throw that out.
As long as you got a grain belt nor'easter with you, I'm cool.
Oh, now you're talking.
That's right. That is right, man. That's what that has been the drink of choice the last few nights.
At your stately Sturgis Manor.
It is at the manor over here. That has been the drink of choice.
I just ended up having a couple Lonely Blondes from Fulton, which is right up the road from us, and my goodness, there's nothing better. I will tell you that.
A lonely blonde, yep, especially desperate lonely blonde. But yeah, let's move on.
Number 2, the entire paranormal field probably could learn a little bit from, to be very honest, right?
Yeah.
So what the medium writes is, I know it may sound creepy to think about seeing or talking to people who have passed, but it actually feels very natural to me. Unaccompanied by the scary soundtracks and lighting of movies, it feels like a friend stopped by. Isn't that the truth, though? It is a privilege to get to know people who are so loved and missed by their family. Once again, spot on. It sometimes feels like I'm playing charades with the spirit because the messages don't always come in the form of words and phrases. Often I see images or spirits will act out something, and I have to figure out what they're trying to get me to say. One woman's father showed me the cover of a Grumpy Old Men DVD to let me know his personality. And almost every spirit who served in the military will start their conversation with me by correcting my posture and giving me the feeling of sitting up straight.
Wow.
There is grief, humor, love, and healing during a reading, but it's never spooky. And can I just say, Joel,
sure.
From my experience, and I don't want to speak for you, but the work that I've done with Nicole, the other mediums that I know, this medium is absolutely right. It is a privilege to be able to have any kind of communication, any kind of moment with them, and that. I think if anyone is trying to get into it or be scared or whatever, please stay away. Please don't come.
Yeah, I agree. These are once people. You know, they are people. They still are people in spirit, and so I do believe. I'm right there with you. They do. I think you should give them the same respect you would anyone else, living or dead. So, provoking for me, although a lot of people do it, and I don't really judge, but for me personally, I've never felt comfortable provoking. Mainly because would I want some jerkwad coming to my house and start screaming at me? Oh, hell no. Things are going to end up badly if that does happen. And so give them the same respect that you would anyone else.
I've had my dad visit me. I've had one of my cats who've deceased visited me. I've had other family members visit me. Once you get into this, you crave those moments. You crave those interactions. And people listening might be like, yeah, whatever. That it's like the lights flickering. You don't know what you're talking about. Once you experience it, and if you have the open mind to do so, there's nothing better than that, Joel, as far as I'm concerned.
That is really a moment there. I know my dad visited me. Oh, I'd say about 6 months after he passed. And I was in a really vivid dream. I mean, like one that you could not deny that was a contact thing. And, once in a while he'll pop in, especially always in dreams. That's how it normally happens for all of us anyway, is dreams, because that's, where we're kind of sleeping and our subconscious is able to communicate, I think, a little bit better. And that could be why the sleeping medium, and his name is Edgar Casey. Maybe that's why Edgar Casey did so well, because his subconscious was able to read instead of his conscious mind where everything was clear then. But yeah, that's also been reported by most people that they come in dreams a lot of times, most times. So,
well, and maybe down the road we do an episode where we talk to a bunch of people who have had loved ones return and see, what the commonalities are with these situations.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to do that. Get some people on to talk about their own experiences of, either a loved one or even a pet. I've heard a lot of times pets come back to their owners, stuff like that. So yeah, very cool. And would love that.
Sounds great, Joel. You should get on that.
I will get on that. I will get right on that. Okay, number 3.
They don't focus on how they died, which, once again, personally speaking, I would agree. When I communicate with someone's deceased loved one, they might mention how they passed, but then they focus on other topics.
Well, sure. The death is
because
just
it's all energy and stuff. Yeah,
it's just a means to an end. I mean, that's all it really is. It doesn't matter. I mean, the variety of death really doesn't matter because it's still the same outcome.
Well, and what people don't understand yet, and everyone will understand this at one point. Death is just another transition to another part of your existence.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Like we just had a neuroscientist on the show Thursday night. And we were waiting.
Do other shows other than Tuesday
I
night?
know, right? We do other shows, but he had written a book called The God Wave. And I was waiting for him to say, because it's a trilogy. I was waiting for him to say, that's crazy. There is no afterlife. You know what? That's a bunch of BS. I look at brains all day, every day. I look at the way they function, even during death. Quite the contrary. He said, no, there's more to it. There's definitely more to it because, there's just, I just know scientifically that there is more.
Right. Absolutely.
And so that's, he really got deep into that subject. So if you want to download that episode of last Thursday, it's called The God Wave was the book, and you're going to want to definitely listen to that one if you're interested at all in brain function and how it might work as you're passing away. We actually heard from a real neuroscientist that'll tell you how it really works.
I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds really good.
Exactly. So getting back to the focusing on how they died, you're right. I have yet to say, once a blue moon, through EVP or what have you, they'll say, I did this or I died this way or that way. But really, they don't tend to dwell on it. And especially I've noticed if it was a suicide, they really don't dwell on that. Yeah, I mean, they don't really want to talk about it.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
If you also take a look at that spirit that we passed at the Palmer, right?
Yeah.
His focus wasn't on how he passed. His focus was on how his wife passed, and how he wronged that situation and how he wanted to make it right. That's the only thing that he was focusing on.
Yeah, he didn't care about anything else, really. I mean, we were just a vehicle to move on. Using us as the medium, basically.
Absolutely.
To get across.
Getting back to this medium and their focus and what they believe, which so far I'm just like, I think you're dead on.
I think so too.
About the people who have passed, and they don't focus on how they died. They want to share messages about what their life was like, what they learned, what they see happening in their lives with the family members. They want to let their loved ones know that they're doing well on the other side, which is exactly what I got from Dad. Yeah. When someone passes, they are surrounded by love. They meet up with their other family members who are in spirit, and they are free from pain and physical limitation. There is so much love and support in the dying process. Those of us who are left behind are the ones who are challenged with coming to terms with the loss and healing from our grief. That is the true difficulty. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. Your loved ones who have passed are doing well. Isn't that something?
Yeah, that is. That is, and really that's how it's been relayed to us as well. I mean, of course, we don't have a magic bullet. We got a little itty-bitty little Bic lighter to see across the other way, and that is through EVP and the ghost box, stuff like that. We don't have the floodlight yet to really shine a light on how it really works, but we kind of have bits and pieces telling us, and that is true. They really are, A, self-aware, B, they're self-aware of other people around them, and C, a lot of times they talk with loved ones. And it's funny because I used to volunteer at a hospice. Okay. And I was probably in my early 20s, and I wanted to give something back. Yeah, I mean, I want to be with people and talk with them because these are more often than not really elderly people that had no one to sit there and talk to while they're dying, but more importantly, their stories were dying with them. And I kind of wanted to talk to them, what their lives are like, what they experienced in life, what history, maybe wasn't written in the history books, stuff like that. And so, but one thing they all had in common was at the end, in my experience anyway, and this is just my own experience.
Sure.
At the end of life, it was always somebody came to get them. A mother, father,
like a family
grandma.
member or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In my experience, and I could be wrong. A lot of people might say, not in my experience, but mine anyway. It was always a peaceful passing. People would pass very peacefully. In fact, a lot of them were happy to pass, which is a weird feeling because, oh my God, you're dying, you're happy to die. Well, no, because they're transitioning, and they see, in my opinion, long before they're dead, they see their loved ones waiting for them to pass. So there's no fear. They just want to hurry up and get on with it.
That's something.
So I totally get that. You're with your family. You are with who you love, and you are where you will love to be at that moment.
That's why I really like to do something down the line when we have enough stories and stuff. I'd love to read people's, like our listeners' stories about loved ones that have come back or whatever, because honestly, if you want the ultimate feel-good episode, I think that this would be it, because I've talked to, and I know you have too, Joel, a lot of people whose family members have passed. And I'm not even talking about people who have been in the paranormal. Like when my dad passed and I started talking about some of the things that happened to me, people who are not into it, they're just like, yeah, well, this is what happened to me.
You're right. And I don't want to cut you off because people will say, fine. Well, I've never experienced anything paranormal, but da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's always, are you kidding me? You're surrounded by the paranormal. You just told me like 7 different weird things that you've experienced, but yet you don't believe in the paranormal? Wow. Open your eyes, dude. Look at around you. That kind of thing. I mean, it's always that. They don't want to believe. It's like they're worried to believe. They just cannot. Some people, not all people, obviously. Some people are very open like you and I, and other people are friends. My mother's very open spiritually, thank God. But a lot of people are just so resistant to believe. They're cautiously optimistic because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to bet on that wrong horse. Yeah, I mean, maybe there isn't anything. Maybe I'm just hallucinating this whole thing. Really, what it comes down to is denial of their own experiences, and that's insane.
No, absolutely. So before I move on to number 4, I would urge anyone who has a cool story to tell. It doesn't have to be a cool story, just a story to tell. Send it to us. Yeah,
did Grandpa come along? Did Dad come along? And really, you don't even have to use your real name. Nope. You can just go ahead, get those over to afterhoursam@gmail.com, or be like Greg Better. Greg, what's your email over there?
I don't know, actually. You can go to Greg at mn-ghostbox.org.
There you go. So if you like Greg better, you can hit him up. But either or, we'd love to hear from you guys. And better yet, if you're feeling willing and you would like to come live on air, that'd be awesome.
Oh, absolutely. That would be amazing. All right, so while we still have some time left, let's go on to number 4. And this is another great one. They're just like you without the body.
Yep, pretty much.
So once again, the medium writes, before I worked as a medium, I worked in an emergency room. I remember one day when a patient was brought in, I could see his spirit floating about 10 feet from his body, watching as the medical professionals tried to work to revive him. I could feel his thoughts and emotions, and what surprised me was how detached he felt from his body, almost as if it belonged to someone else. He was interested in what was happening, but he didn't feel the tragic loss that most of us have learned to associate with death. He was fine and free from pain, without a body but still existing. We are all a spirit in a body. The body lives and dies, but the spirit continues. Your loved ones who have passed still exist as well, complete with their personalities, memories, and their love for you. And I'll tell you, Joel, this is something that I've always just assumed, to be honest. Like, we most of us, like, live our lives worrying about our job, our possessions, all this stuff, and I'm certainly one of them, right? Mm-hmm. I have a feeling as soon as my time comes, and I think most people, not all, but most people, when your time comes, suddenly that veil is revealed, and you just suddenly stop. You stop worrying about all this stuff, and you just realize that there's a bigger universe out there, and I'm going to go there because love is not hampered by possessions and all this stuff. It's all that stuff gets peeled away, and the true pure form of yourself just comes alive. It's really exciting.
I think a good friend of mine, he happens to be he runs a funeral home, and he was the guy that didn't, he buried my father, got him ready,
sure.
and we were talking. I knew him well enough to kind of talk with him. And he's a believer, of course. He's seen so much. He believes in the other side and the paranormal and all that stuff. In fact, his mortuary is haunted as we speak. That's whole nother thing I could talk to you about later on, Greg. But we were talking, and he says, I get it. I get a lot of strange requests. I had a guy that wanted to be buried in his car. Stuff like that. You can't do that, unfortunately.
No,
but he says, here's the deal. I've yet to see a U-Haul on a hearse. A U-Haul towing a hearse. Or a hearse towing a U-Haul. There we go. A hearse towing a U-Haul, meaning that you can't take it with you when you go. That all that falls away, and what you may have owned, you may have enjoyed it in life, but you don't need it or even miss it, from what I understand, in death. So, you're absolutely right. I mean, everything that we have in this world right now doesn't mean a damn thing when we go. When we make that ultimate crossover, the last thing we're worried about is, boy, I wonder if they're going to cut the lawn in my house over there. What the hell?
Right?
That's the last thing that anyone worries about. What they worry about more than anything else, volunteering in a hospice for a couple of years, and then watching my own father die. And really, I got to know death a whole lot better. My dad died at 63. Totally was not expecting at 63 years old to die.
Way too young.
It gave me a real perspective, though, of how short this truly is. Mm-hmm. And no matter how long you live, you still feel like, wow, this is really a short ride.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when I was asking even my own father about, stuff, he almost got angry with me. He's like, who the hell cares? It doesn't matter anymore. My struggle is going to be over soon. And whoever gets whatever, gets whatever. But at the end of the day, I could give a damn less.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do want to say, and I'm going to go rogue here because we don't have much time left.
Sure.
I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the number 5, the 5th one, is it's easier than you might think to communicate with them. And I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to tell very quickly how, I totally agree with that. And I've told my sister, before you go to bed, ask Dad if he'll come to you in a dream. Yeah. That's really, honestly.
Yeah, that actually works. I've done that, and it's worked several times. I've been like, well, I felt kind of dumb at the time. It was early after my dad passed, 6 months. Okay, I'm going to try what every medium friend of mine told me to do here. And so I did that. I reached out. I said, hey, Dad, you want to talk to me? I really miss you. If you want to talk to me, come to me in my dream. I would love to talk with you. And it worked. And I was the biggest skeptic of that's how that works forever. Thinking, well, people have all sorts of weird dreams, and they hallucinated that because of dreaming. Man, I am a total believer in the dream visit now, having one.
Yeah.
It really, Greg, like you've been in that same situation. Your dad reached out to you as well, and wow, what a profound moment when that happens too. You can't look at anything the same anymore.
No. It's amazing.
And so really the only thing that I asked my dad, what's it like in heaven? He says, man, there's no gun smoke here. That was his favorite show.
Yeah, but surely
he was trying to joke around.
Arnaz or something is
yeah, he was trying to joke around. He's like,
James Arnaz.
Yeah. In the dream, he was trying to joke because he had a good sense of humor. But man, we gotta leave you with all that. I'd like to revisit that in the future, all that stuff, Greg. Maybe we should work on getting.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, we're gonna work on getting. We haven't done this in a long time. A couple psychic mediums on, and I'd like to maybe open up down the road calls so people can get mini readings. We haven't done that in years. It's been at least a couple years now, so I'd like that. I'd like to get get that going again. I know that's been the one thing that a lot of people ask is, when are we bringing back any mediums onto the show? And let me tell you, we were working on that as we speak, and we will indeed have a call-in show where you can have a mini reading with one of the more famous. We have a couple lined up, but one of them is very notable right now that everyone knows who she is. So we will get that arranged, and we have to run a break. We got to bring Shannon in. We're going to talk about folklore. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. You're listening to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If pop culture is to be believed, roughly 40% of all people are actually vampires, or dating one. Well, undead or not, you can always save on a clean, comfortable room at Motel 6, even if you sleep during the day because direct sunlight turns you into a pile of sparkly coffee grounds. Speaking of which, we have free coffee every morning. You day sleepers may want to go for the decaf. I'm Tom Bodette, and we'll leave the light on for you. Book online at motel6.com.
Hi, I'm Kip Parker. And I'm Charlie Parker. And we're the Parker Brothers. Hey, Charlie, what's missing from our game catalog? I don't know, Kip. Tell me. Well, you can't talk to the dead. You sure as hell can. That's why we got this brand new game called Ouija. Ouija? Well, break that down for me. Well, it's Wii because you're having a great time, and G, it's because G, aren't you having a blast because you're having a good time with the Wii. It looks like it smelled like a Chinaman got caught in there. Don't question it. Well, Ouija, Kip, tell me about it. Well, inside the package comes a flat board with all the letters of the alphabet, numbers from 0 to 9, and a yes-no written out by itself. Well, that sounds like a lot of stuff going on. That's got a lot of stuff going on indeed, Charlie. It also comes with this planchette, which hovers over the letters the dead are trying to tell you. Well, how does that work, Chip? Well, you ask the question, and then the dead move your hands in the direction of the answers. That sounds like a heck of a way to find Grandpa's slave money. Turns out it was in the attic. But the questions don't have to be as serious as slavery. You can also find out if Sally's got a crush on you. The dead like to answer all sorts of trivial questions. Feels like they'd have better things to do with their time, Kip. No, lost souls are lost forever, and they're really glad to help. Well, gee, Kip, can't you just get any sort of board with numbers and letters and talk to the dead? The dead prefer quality like anybody else. Quality you can only find at Parker & Parker.
The Ouija board, brought to you by the Parker Brothers, available in both white and colored wallworks. Separate but equal savings.
Author Steve Asher brings us Hauntings of Trilogy. Steve's first book, Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary. This first installment of the trilogy tells us the tale of the Kentucky State Penitentiary and why it's so haunted. With every turn of the page will be something new and terrifying. Pick up Steve's new book, Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and all better bookstores everywhere.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the wacky waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the wacky waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to Geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
You're dead! I saw you die! I was faking. I used ninja focus to slow my heart rate down. What are you doing? I'm burying you. I'm alive! I'm alive! You're waking the neighbors! No. Shut up! No! Now I'm gonna play your drum set.
Welcome to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
Welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Greg Bakken, and tonight we have a heck of a show on tap. A good friend of mine, you know, just the same lady that, I don't know, became the paranormal genealogist because some guy at a radio show might have said something. No, it's Shannon Bradley Byers, a good friend of mine. She's an author and paranormal investigator, but she's also a genealogist, which she actually helped me get to the bottom of my own family, which is a very colorful family, I might add. Past just the Sturgis, South Dakota stuff, she actually went deeper than I ever thought was possible. Really pulled up a lot of records, and that's really what Shannon is. Really a good sleuth, and she's a good person, but she's also a good sleuth, a good finder of knowledge. And she's written a few books. Her newest one, of course, is that we're all enjoying and we're all talking about tonight will be Paranormal Fakelore, not folklore, Fakelore, Nevermore, Real Histories of Haunted Locations. And, of course, you can get that over there at Amazon.com. That's the best place to grab that book. Nab it, read it. You're going to like it. It deals with a lot of cool, different stories that maybe there are some stories you weren't quite sure, but then she fleshes out the real. She is the Paul Harvey of the paranormal. Yes, and now for the rest of the story. Shannon, welcome to After Hours AM.
Hello, gentlemen. How are y'all?
Oh, you know,
I'm so happy to be on tonight.
We are doing all right. You know, we're trying to survive, and yeah, of course, we both were reading your book and good stuff, and really kind of some of the takes that you have really blow the lid. And do you find that people are a little like, "Come on, Shannon, why are you ruining our good time?"
I haven't run into that yet. I'm expecting to run into it next month when I'm a guest at Scarefest, because some of the people I expose are also guests at Scarefest.
Oh,
so.
Well now.
Oh, yeah. I'm waiting to get into that. That should be interesting.
We're all about exposure.
So you have... Well, go ahead. No,
please
jump
go
the
ahead.
gun. I'm so bad at jumping the gun.
Jump the gun. Jump it now.
Yeah, one thing you have to consider is, you know, both of you, I'm sure, are looking through the book. I don't know if either of you have actually finished it.
Well,
but
you
know, the way, you know, a lot of those were on my paranormal genealogist website that I ran for a couple of years, and I decided, you know, these need to be more in depth. These need to be out in the public, and you know, every single thing that I put in those books is backed up with documented facts.
Okay, now
there's no supposition on my part.
So, okay, now where? $64,000 question. Where are the facts coming from? Are we talking about Wikipedia, or are you digging these up firsthand?
Oh no, you know, these are court records. These are newspaper archives. These are vital records on the people. Death certificates, birth certificates.
Sure.
You know, actual public documentation. No, I don't use Wikipedia for anything.
Did you go to these locations and invest and do the research, or is that online? Or
it depends on the location. It's like, you know, doing the Myrtles. Being in Atlanta, it's not real easy for me to get to Louisiana.
Sure.
So I had some boots on the ground there that helped me, and actually went to the courthouses and got me some copies of things that I couldn't find online. You know, there's several different stories in there, and I kind of say in the introduction that the Myrtles emotionally was one of the hardest for me to do, because in order to debunk the Cleo slave story, I had to actually sit and go through the original documents in the Louisiana slave database, and that was depressing.
Yeah, I remember reading that when I got to that chapter, and I was like, I totally get it. You know, I guess my question is, at what point were you just kind of like, you know, I don't feel like I'm hearing the right story enough? I mean, what prompted you to be like, I'm going to start writing about the truth here?
Well, I can tell you exactly when it happened. Back when Ghost Adventures did the first Bobby Mackey episode.
Sure.
Yep.
And they started talking about Pearl Bryan. I have been a true crime buff since the age of 8, and I'm not embarrassed to tell anyone I'm 49. So that's a long time. That's 40 years that I've been looking into true crime stuff. And, it all started with Lizzie Borden. Mm-hmm. But you had Lizzie Borden. Few years later, you had the Pearl Bryan murder case. And, H.H. Holmes kind of all wrapped up in the same decade.
Yeah, it was a big decade for true crime back in those days. I mean, you had, like you said, H.H. Holmes running around. Didn't you have the Fishers as well, right around that same time period?
No, the Fishers was 1819.
Oh, 1819. Okay, way before. Never mind. My bad. But
way before.
Way before. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
But I was watching this episode, and they started talking about all this stuff with, her head being thrown down the well to hell, and, it was part of a satanic sacrifice, and all this stuff that they were attributing that I knew for a fact was bullcrap, because I had been studying her case for decades.
Sure.
I mean, way before Bobby Mackey even bought that property, I had been studying that case.
Well, how long was that?
And when I was sitting there watching that, and I was like, okay, well, it never dawned on me that maybe these shows were actually playing around with the history.
Maybe they're perpetuating. Would it be, as a good friend of mine, Penn Jillette would say, bullcrap? That they were perpetuating bullcrap? And I'm cleaning it up, of course.
Yeah. I mean, these places, the Myrtles, Old Charleston Jail, Bobby Mackey's, all of them are selling you a story for the good money that you're paying to go to investigate these places.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's
old saying is truth is stranger than fiction, but there's always, there's a grain of salt of truth in there somewhere.
Yeah.
That all this stuff exploded from.
Well, okay.
In some cases.
Pearl Bryan, how long was that tale when you were a child? Was that told through the ages that allegedly her head was decapitated and chucked down a well, or was that a new thing circa Ghost Adventures that they perpetuated the well theory?
Well, it was not brought down through the ages, no. The detectives, they never actually proved where her head was, but the detectives came up with a pretty good theory, and if you read the book, you can follow, how the detectives figured out where they think her head went. Mm-hmm. But somebody wrote a book around 2001, cashing in on, Carl the caretaker, who claimed to be possessed there and all that stuff that worked for Bobby Mackey. Somebody wrote a book, and that's where these stories started coming from.
Okay.
Bobby Mackey's structure was never a slaughterhouse. The slaughterhouse was several hundred yards away from where the quote-unquote well to hell is. That was actually an active whiskey distillery when Pearl Bryan was murdered. And there are actually 3 wells. They contracted with the railroad, underneath the railroad to the Licking River, so they could pump water in for the distilling process.
Gotcha.
And those 3 wells are still in the bottom of, in the basement of Bobby Mackey. Mm-hmm. It's just 2 of them are filled in, and one of them's the one they deemed the well to hell.
Well, do you ever reach out to these shows and say, "Wait a minute, you guys are playing with the truth here"? I mean,
nope.
Do you ever go, "Hey, by the way, that's factually inaccurate"?
No,
you should.
It wouldn't do any good.
Well, I don't know. I mean, because you're doing a good job with doing it, and I have to say I'm very impressed that you have been following the location of Bobby Mackey's before Bobby had it. Because I mean, he bought it in 1978, so you've been really interested in this place for a long time.
Oh yeah. I mean, you've got to consider that the distillery was there, then the distillery burnt down.
Yeah.
And they tore down the ruins, and then they built the speakeasy, and then that morphed into what is there today as Bobby Mackey. So there's been several different buildings there over time.
I'm going to
And it's,
assume.
all it takes is going and looking at an old map of it was called Finchtown back then, not Wilder like it is now. But you can very easily find the map that I got in the book that shows exactly where the distillery was in relationship to where the slaughterhouse that they talk about.
Yeah.
And it was just a family slaughterhouse who, if you went out and hunted and needed something,
processed,
butchered,
and
processed. It was a family slaughterhouse.
Gotcha.
It wasn't this big industrial kind of slaughterhouse.
It wasn't the Texas Chainsaw Massacre slaughterhouse. Gotcha.
Yeah.
But,
kind of like Motel Hell.
Exactly. But, really, I'm sure you've gone to Bobby Mackey's firsthand and poked around in the building and talked with all the owners and stuff like that. And what do they say, if anything, if you have done that? Oh, you have not?
You've got to consider, that's way up in Kentucky.
Well, no, and I mean, to be fair, though, I'm in Minnesota. I've gone down to Bobby Mackey's, and trust me, I'm not saying anything negative against you not going. Please don't get that. But, I've been there, and I know you do a very good job in the book saying, I'm not here to say whether a place is haunted or not. You're saying that you're trying to clear up the whole the misinformation that's been going around for so long. But I'll tell you, when I was there, it certainly wasn't the gates of hell like people say it is. But when we went up to Carl's apartment and we did an investigation up there, that was where we got the most evidence up there, because there was something very different up there than anywhere else in the whole building. But I certainly would agree. I wish I read your book. I wish I knew about your blog before I went there, because we go in there thinking what we're spoon-fed, and it's very much it's refreshing to read what you're saying.
Well, and part of the reason I do this, and like you said, I'm not going to tell you the place isn't haunted. There, and like I was saying, I give you examples in the book. There's plenty of reasons for that area to be haunted, with the bridge collapse and the lynchings and stuff like that. When I was a guest at Scarefest last year, and I had wanted to go to Bobby Mackey's, but unfortunately, he's only open a couple days a week.
For what we want to go there for, too,
yeah.
I couldn't get up there when they were open to get in the building, because it's like an hour north of Lexington.
Sure.
We were going to try to go, but my whole point is, yes, this place can be haunted, but in order to do a proper investigation, you need to be asking the right questions.
Well, yeah,
and if you're going into a place, let's go to Old Charleston Jail, for example. If you go into Old Charleston Jail accusing Lavinia Fisher of being a serial murderer when she never killed anybody, yes, she's going to get pissed off at you.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
That's not going to do your investigation any good if you're going in there with false information, not being able to ask the right EVP question.
Shannon, do you not believe that a lot of investigators today, and I don't want to use this broad brush, so again, not use a broad brush, but do you think a lot of people in the paranormal don't do their own due diligence to get the right story behind a location, and they might just take a story that they may have heard somewhere at face value?
Well, exactly. But you've got to consider, you've got people at these locations feeding you the same crap you're seeing on TV.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
And so, their idea of research may be, okay, we're going to Google Lavinia Fisher. Well, this is what the tour company down there tells you. This is what they've said on every ghost TV show, because that everybody's gone to Old Charleston Jail. This is what Wikipedia says.
Yeah.
The whole thing with her being a, supposed witch and all that stuff is all settled if you look at the newspaper account that was written the day of the execution from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's all it takes. Is finding the original newspaper.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, did she truly meet the hangman's noose wearing her wedding dress?
No.
Okay.
No. When they arrested her and John, they immediately burned their house down. They had no belongings left.
So it seems that, like, because I'm reading it right now, what you've written as we're talking about the Lavinia Fisher case, and you're right. I mean, there's a lot of misinterpretations or flat out lies by some of the media out there. I mean, for years we were taught to believe that she met the gallows wearing her wedding dress, and this happened and that happened, and then of course I read your book and that's completely bull crap. That didn't happen.
What I think is very interesting, and I think it's almost worth pointing out for people who are listening too, is the bit of advice that someone gave you, Shannon, about folklore and what that really is in terms of the story of its time. What was that?
What Kent said about, folklore is colored by the events that are currently going on. I mean, I know I'm not quoting that exactly, but that's paraphrasing.
And that is true. That is true. A lot of folklore is colored by our current events. And also throughout the years, stories are added onto tremendously because of the other times in history. They'll add bits and pieces, and by the time it gets to us in 2017, there's already been a flurry of misinformation attached to that story. It's like
that big giant game of telephone, that's gone on for 100 and whatever years, depending on which story you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever? I mean, this is kind of a very similar question to what Joel asked, but I mean, it's not even about the TV shows or anything. But there's especially for Bobby Mackey's, all the paranormal stuff seems to be, as far as the tours and what, is handled by a paranormal team. Have you ever reached out to them and be like, do you think that you might want to update what you're telling the people when they're coming in?
Well, I know when I first published research on Pearl, and I always call that the Pearl Bryan story. It happens to be Bobby Mackey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's Pearl's story. It's not Bobby Mackey's story. When I first published that on the blog, the team at the time, and this was in 2015, the team at the time that was in charge, it was a newer team that had taken over doing the tours, and they actually reached out to me and thanked me for the information, and they were trying to give a more current version of events, I guess.
Sure.
Now, I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody that's actually gone up there and investigated with this group that had it in 2015, so I don't know if they actually did or not.
I did. I was there. I was there in October of 2015, and we did the person who I investigate with, Nicole. We do a web series. We went out there. It was very much like Waverly Hills, what you said, in terms of that you get like 2 hours for a certain amount of money. Yeah. Otherwise, you do the overnight for a lot more money. So we opted for the 2 hour thing with Bobby Mackey's. Nicole might have a better idea than I do, but I don't remember the story varying very much from what we know, because that would have stuck out to me a whole lot more. To be fair, a lot of it was like, I don't want to hear the story, I just want to investigate. But I don't recall anything there that was said that made me go, oh, that's a different take that I haven't heard before.
Okay. Well, that answers your question.
Well, years ago, God, I want to say 10 years ago, Bobby Mackey actually reached out to me as a radio person. And this is, of course, before pre-Ghost Adventures, all that kind of stuff. And it was more locally known than it is nationally known about his haunted location. I did go down there that long ago, and I sat and I had a few beers. And at that time, he was playing in a band. I'm not sure if he still is today or not. But that time, I kind of kicked around, talked to the locals about what they knew about it. Nobody brought up, any of the locals, the real story of Pearl Bryan. Everybody had the head in the well story. Cut the head off right down the well. And, I wasn't there to investigate. I happened to be going through. I was going down to Texas at that point. And so it was kind of a bit of a detour, kind of about a 4-hour detour from where I was, the interstate where I wanted to be. And so I went there. It was an interesting place, interesting story. But I got to say, I didn't feel a breathing demons of hell anywhere, to be honest with you. And he gave me a guided tour, one-on-one, just kind of walked around a little bit. And, of course, I said, well, that's all very cool and very awesome, but where's your documentation to back all this up? Nothing. There was no hard evidence that she ever had her head cut off and thrown down a well. Which, hey...
He was killed miles away.
Exactly. And so, hey, I didn't push the issue back then. I said, well, if you don't have any documentation, I really can't, call it news. This is all speculation.
It's an interesting side to this, though, also, and I'm not speaking for all investigators, but certainly when we did the investigation there and in other places, sometimes we're not going in there asking for Pearl, right? We're going in there just to see if anyone can communicate with us, and it's interesting. I wonder how many people do. I mean, if you go to somewhere like Villisca, you might be more, or Waverly for that matter, you might be just more of an open net for just all sorts of people to see if they would communicate with us. But certainly I don't recall either Nicole or myself looking specifically at Pearl. Matter of fact, I think that story, finding out that it's not very true at all, is very secondary to our investigation. I wonder how many other people that affects also.
Trust me, there are a lot who claim they've gotten Pearl down in that basement. A lot.
Yeah, you're right. I have seen just about every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's investigated at least at one time or another has claimed they got Pearl at some point. Whether EVP or something.
I'm not even talking about the TV shows.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people that I have talked to that have gone to investigate who swear up, went, and down to others. They talked to Pearl down there.
Yeah. And
so,
that is true. That is true. And it's like, well, why would she be there if it never happened there? Which, now that lends credibility to maybe, trickster spirits or people bringing other things in. And by now, the problem is you get a place like Bobby Mackey's as a paranormal investigator. They bring their own baggage with them. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times. You know what I mean? It's like Villisca, for instance. It is totally polluted by investigators bringing crap in. Okay, it's hard to, and Greg, you could attest to this, I'm sure, as well. It's hard to get to the real haunting because all this other crap followed them in.
Well, I call it the paranormal STD, so...
Yeah, exactly.
That's what
do.
Is.
And so, if they got Pearl Bryan, which would be amazing because, again, she was not murdered on location, and I'm sure that she's not going to be hanging around Bobby Mackey's going, yep, my head, it went right down that well right over there. It was a sight to see.
See, that's a long way off. I won't ruin the surprise because, I want people to read the book.
Sure.
But let's just say Pearl's head ended up in another state.
Wow. She was ahead of the game. Oh, sorry.
I don't get it. I don't get that joke.
Oh, God, I am horrible. I do apologize for the bad humor. But really, there is a truth behind every tale. And does it surprise me that there's been some embellishments after the years? Not really. Not really, because, of course, every story gains traction, and then it's embellished upon throughout the tellings.
Well, I think I can tell you, at least with Pearl, because one thing I always try to do is try to figure out where some of the stuff might have stemmed from,
Sure.
And you can't always do that. But in Pearl's case, if you read the court transcripts of the gentleman who drove the buggy, who drove her to her death, he gave a very detailed route on where they made him go.
Yeah.
They left Cincinnati, came over into Kentucky, and the buggy driver actually stopped in the parking lot of the distillery because he was so scared he didn't want to go any further.
Mm-hmm.
And they pulled a gun on him and made him keep going up to Fort Thomas.
Gotcha.
So Pearl Bryan was briefly in the parking lot of the distillery before she died.
Well, true. That's about, Elvis was in the parking lot of my mall. I mean,
Well, I'm just saying, that's the closest
exactly.
she was ever at Bobby Mackey.
And we don't say Elvis died at the shopping mall. So I mean, so I get it. I totally get it, and that, to connect the two just because she happened to stop there for 5 minutes really doesn't lend credibility to that she's haunting Bobby Mackey's. But,
no, but I can guarantee you that somebody read a newspaper account somewhere that saw that she had
a misprint.
Been there.
Yeah, a misprint or misstatement by some ill-informed journalist and somehow made it in there. We got to run a break. When we come back, we're going to go tackle the granddaddy of them all. The granddaddy of them all. You've seen the movie. You've heard the tales of The Exorcist. We come back. We're going to talk about that a little bit with Shannon. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. You're listening to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
It's your ideas, work, and creativity that make it your yard. At Ace, we're here to help with hoses and sprinklers to nurture growth, gardening tools for the shape of good things to come, even the right fertilizer and bug killers to make the grass a little greener. You'll find it all now at Ace, your place, with everything you need for your yard, plus helpful advice, almost like we're right there. Ace,
the helpful place.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teams, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
You're listening to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is the beautiful and talented Greg Bakken.
I am beautiful.
You are. You're too sexy for the show. Too sexy.
And I'm the handsome one.
And we are, of course, talking to the equally beautiful and talented Shannon Byers. Or do you want me to call you Shannon Bradley Byers? Huh? Which one do you like?
Fine.
Okay, Shannon Byers, a little bit easier to talk, a little bit rolls off the tongue a little bit better. And we're talking all about Paranormal Fakelore, Nevermore, which is the title of Shannon's new book. And of course, when we were leaving, one thing in the book that really caught my attention right away is the Exorcist house. Because I've been to the Exorcist house. The Exorcist house and the boy, you don't believe he was ever possessed, dude. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you believe he was possessed or not possessed, the boy?
Personally, no, I do not.
All right.
But that doesn't matter. As far as the research into what happened, what I believe doesn't matter. But no, personally, I never believed he was possessed.
Just your own thinking and thoughts. Now, again, we're not holding you to anything. Of course, no one's going to come to your house with pitchforks and torches. Why do you believe he wasn't possessed?
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure they won't.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
Pretty sure.
But if you want, her address is...
We could set that up, if you really want that to happen, but it sounds like a fun Friday night for most of us, but really we'll keep them away.
Yeah.
I'll be washing my hair that night, unfortunately. So.
I'm right at the police station. They don't want to do that.
No, definitely. But why would you believe that he was not possessed?
I had a very long conversation with a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And throughout my feelings. And, you know, he's very familiar with the case. And we both came to the same conclusion that he was more probably of an Asperger's kind of person.
So do you believe that if he were to be brought into a psychiatrist today, that there would be a better diagnosis and they would not go the paranormal route, that they would go, like you said, the Asperger's route?
Absolutely. 100%. That is my belief.
No, and it's very interesting.
And I'm not trying to push that belief on anybody because that's my own personal belief. That is what I get.
True.
When I sit and I read that diary, you know, from an unbiased point of view.
But you do put it in the book.
Yes.
So I mean, obviously you're putting your position out there, though.
I'm putting my position out there. I'm not trying to force anybody to choose sides. I just wanted people to know which side I came down on.
Sure. Now, the Exorcist house. Now, I've been there, to be completely honest, full disclosure. And it's a house. It's a house.
Mm-hmm.
It's
an old house.
It's an old house. Sure, it's creepy because it's old. I did not, thank God, have any thoughts of, oh my God, there's a demon still lurking in this house. There was no fire-breathing demon going, Joel, you have finally come. Nothing like that happened. It's just an old house.
Let me ask you this. When the final exorcism was done, he was not in that house, so why would the demon be there?
You know,
I was just going to say real fast, it's interesting that you bring that up because I don't know if you've read Stephen LeChance's new book about that exorcist.
I'm very good friends with Stephen.
Have you read the book?
Oh, yes.
So,
and he and I have differing opinions.
You know, and that's totally fine. And it's interesting how, you know, it's a valid question you're asking. Why would there be something there when there is when it wasn't there? It was done at the hospital, but at the same time, like in his book, you know, however you want to believe it, that he points out that it is their belief that everywhere that boy had been for that exorcism in St. Louis, that place has been marked in some way by whatever had afflicted him.
What about the places in Maryland?
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about those places. It sounds like that nothing happened there.
You know, stuff happened in Maryland too. So why aren't those places supposedly horrible and awful as well?
Good point, because, you know, even to this day, they have the furniture at the final Exorcist location in St. Louis locked up. The furniture. You can't get to it. It's locked behind a locked door. And when I asked, well, why are you locking up the old futon there that, you know, or whatever happened to be in there? They said, evil leaves a stain. Was exactly what they told me. I'm like, yeah, well, get some carpet cleaner and take care of that evil. But really, I have a hard time buying that.
If you read the diary,
if
you read the diary, and you read the accounts of the things that were claimed to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's much more theatrical when he's not in the hospital. When he is in the hospital and it's a controlled environment, it's I don't want to use the word boring, but that's the word I'm going to use compared to what was happening at the other locations.
The hospital
so
uses the word, Shannon, docile.
Yeah, he was much calmer. The stuff that happened was, you know, it was not, I use the word theatrical.
Mm-hmm.
It was not as theatrical as it was in the other locations. Why is that?
Weren't the hospitals more of a spiritual nature, or were they not?
How is the hospital going to be any more spiritual than when they took him to the rectory?
Well,
the rectory is going to be just as spiritual as the hospital.
And that's fine. And I don't have an answer for that because I don't have answers for those sort of things. But I'm just asking the question, if like the hospital had more, like the rectory or anywhere else, have a more spiritual surrounding than the house did.
Or it could be he couldn't get away with as much at the hospital because there was more staff.
Mm-hmm. It's very possible too. You know, and it's interesting, like at both the hospital and at his house or the house he was at, that it seemed like that he didn't really become active for whatever reason until the evening, with some outbursts during the day, but mainly it was the evening that he started acting up.
Well, and and when you read it, I need to qualify, and I need to say, I do believe demon possession is possible. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying at all that I don't believe in it. I just don't believe in it in this case. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
If you read cases, the time of day doesn't really matter a whole lot until you get to the fanatics who say, "Oh, because that happened at 3 o'clock in the morning." Demon possession cases they're just like ghosts. They can, you can have outbursts 24/7. You can have it 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon,
Sure.
10 o'clock in the morning.
Sure.
If you look at what is accepted as the signs of demonic possession, they have a checklist they go down before they decide they're going to perform an exorcist, and he did not meet them.
Very true. By the way, we have a caller. Caller, would you like to weigh in? Hello, caller. Oh, they hung up. Evidently, we intimidated them too much, and they did not want to try.
I'm sorry.
Let me say, because I think this is all very good information and whatnot. I just want to clarify. I'm not saying that the activity happened at night because it's demonic. I'm just saying more of a behavior standpoint. And I know we're veering from the book, so if I keep doing that, I do apologize. But I just found it interesting from a behavior standpoint that the kid is up all day, and then he's going through the night. And it's interesting from a behavior standpoint of kind of what's going on here.
And, that is one thing you can look at. That never really struck me as anything poignant.
Mm-hmm.
The more poignant thing for me was that his behavior at the hospital was less theatrical than the other locations. That was
No, I agree with you.
I
agree with you. When I read the diaries, and you're absolutely right. It was way more over the top in private locations like the home or this or that. But once he hit the hospital, speaking to reading that whole situation, they actually used again the word docile to describe him. They did not report any giant outbursts, anything like what had been reported in his own home or on the way to the hospital, the various stops.
One thing that I have always said is I would love to be able to get my hands on the particular Catholic reader that he was supposedly reading right before he gives this great, gigantic story, all this detail of Michael saving him and all this stuff. I would love to read that reader to see what was in it, to see if that triggered his description of the demon leaving.
Sure, if it's like mimics what's in the reader.
Yeah.
Because that's, he didn't speak in another language. All he did was repeat what the priests were saying. He never spoke himself fluently in another language.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, if you really get to the nuts and bolts of the diary, they do cite Latin as being one of the languages that he used. But that's funny because a lot of the exorcism happened in Latin.
Well, and they make note in there that he was repeating what they were saying to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also...
and he was a smart kid. This guy grew up to work for NASA.
Well, exactly. I mean, he was no dummy. The guy's still alive, as far as I know, and was and is extremely smart.
Yeah.
It's also interesting...
last I checked, I check every 3 or 4 months to see if he's passed away, and I haven't come across anything yet. But
well, and it's interesting too, like stuff that hasn't shown up in other books that I found very interesting that you point out, like the idea of like, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, that the priest had mentioned like the words that are showing up on his body look more like lipstick than anything.
Yeah.
Mm.
No, you had this one priest that, and I say this in the book, it depends on who was paying him to say what.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, yeah.
And I prefer the things that, that were not media spotlight comments from him.
Yeah. Well, it seems like just a casual reader looking at not your book, but at the story, because your book really kind of goes in depth. Hey, this is what I think is the real deal. And I respect that, because not a lot of people would go, this is what I think really happened, because there's so much out there about The Exorcist, that we want to believe. Like the firmly held story of the possession. Shannon, you really dug deep. But one thing that I noticed that nobody ever really tackles is looking at it and saying, well, wait a minute, because if you could catch it, they could catch it too. And they're authors of these other numerous books on the case. They never mention what you're mentioning at all. And they could easily. They could say, well, I'm reading right here in the diary. They're saying that he's repeating what he was, what he was being told. They seem to, in my opinion, only gloss over that fact quite quickly. And why is that?
I mean,
why is that?
Well,
why not?
I mean, you and I have had this discussion. It's no different than, people that have on these people who say this stuff that I'm proving is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah.
They've got a story to tell. I'm never in them, some may have an agenda, some may not, but I've told you a million times, I want to have the kind of radio show where I ask these people why.
Well, exactly, and
the proof is right there in front of your face.
Well,
why do you insist on ABCD?
Here's what I kind of think is a lot of it too. Is I think it's not even in some cases. I think like the Exorcist house might be a great example of it. Is belief. I think the belief of people who are writing this stuff. They don't want to, they don't want to believe. It's an amazing story of good versus evil, right?
And it makes money, Greg. It makes a crap ton of money.
Well, that too. I mean, I'm not even thinking that, but you're absolutely right. But it is like a matter of I think some of these people, like the book that I mentioned earlier, I do feel like the author, it's a very personal belief system thing. And whether, you're saying you have the facts here and everything else, whether or not the kid had this possession or not, it suddenly starts it's digging into their belief system, and it's frightening. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people, I think.
Oh, and it is to a point, but then they take it to the extreme. When you get to the Exorcist movie, and the reports of supposedly weird things and stuff that happened, when that was being filmed. I'm good friends with Peter Blatty's son. And we've talked about this for years, about it, and he just laughs when people start these diatribes of, what supposedly happened while they were filming the movie because it was based on a real event and blah, 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 blah. And, it's all bullcrap.
Yeah. Well, the biggest one to come out of that movie, a winner, was Campbell's Soup.
Yes, it was.
They made more than anybody else in that movie. Just simply for the pea soup. But really, you're right, though. I've read a lot of books about the Exorcist, rather. A lot of books in the case. Read a lot of the journals. Tried to wrap my own head around it. And you're right. To me, it always kind of smacked of, wow, someone's making a buck here. Because, a lot of times, what was in black and white in front of my own face, which I could find as easily as anybody else, was glossed over in this book that made sense to debunk it. And they didn't want that to be there.
And the thing is, it's people making money off of it now. I mean, the guy that owns the house will sit there and tell you in an interview on TV that the first time he saw the house was June 6th of 2006.
Yeah.
All you got to do is look up the property records for that house to find out he bought it in December of 2005.
Yeah, Zillow. Zillow has it right there.
So where's his agenda? And then you look at the other side of the coin. Here you've got this boy who has never, ever come out and said anything. He has not tried to make a dime off of this. And he could have. All he's got to do is call up, CNN and say, hey, my name's so-and-so.
I mean, could you?
I do not name him in the book because I'm going to respect his privacy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I respect that as well. So, but what I was going to say is, could you imagine, though, guys, but to both of you, Shannon and Greg, if he decided to go, you know what, I'm going to go on the old con circuit, and I'm going to go to the Paracons and tell my tale firsthand. The man would be a millionaire in a month's time.
Well, and it's interesting, too.
A couple of times over.
It's interesting, too, that I've never seen anywhere else, and granted, I haven't read as much as Joel as what you're saying you've read or anything, but at the same time, it's like I've never seen anyone like you have in your book talk a little bit more about his character beyond what we know from those nights of the diary, like the 12, 13 entries or whatever it is, that like the swearing and stuff, from what we've heard from other people who knew him at that age, wasn't necessarily uncharacteristic for him.
Not at all. He was mean. He was a mean child.
That's how it was described. You're absolutely right. Go ahead.
Yes, if the witnesses are to be believed. And at the time, these people, there wasn't a movie out. There wasn't anything. Well, yes, at the time they had been found, but they didn't want to be known. They weren't trying to get anything out of saying the kid was a little monster.
Yeah.
When this whole stuff started. He would sick his dog on people just to watch it happen and sit there and laugh.
Okay. This is how it was explained to me when I asked about the media side of things, the making money side of things in this story, and the real personality of the boy that was involved. That you cannot make money unless you have a sympathetic victim.
Well,
you gotta have the sympathetic victim.
The story would have been just as interesting to me. I mean, I'm always going to come down on the side of fact because that's me. I'm a researcher. That's what I do. I track down the facts, and the facts to me are always more. It's like with Pearl Bryan and Lavinia Fisher. People seem to with Lavinia disregard the fact that she was convicted for one thing. Mm-hmm. In 1819, and then all of a sudden in January of 1820, she was convicted for something she wasn't even tried for.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And nobody looks at the fact that colonial justice totally screwed her over.
That's true. She was screwed. It was not the norm of the time.
And that's, basically that's my point in every story that I tell, is that these people, maybe they were good, maybe they weren't so good. Lavinia was a robber. She wasn't the best person in the world, but she never murdered anybody. Yeah. And that's my point in every story, is these people are being maligned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and they're not around to defend themselves.
Could have been...
People are making money off the malignment.
But could it have been, even back in those days, if it bleeds, it leads in the news? And it was way more...
because in her case, this is, it wasn't a news story. This is, the actual court stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But when I read her transcripts of the court case, which I have done after you and we've talked about her before at length, that it was really kind of a dog and pony show. So a lot of what was going on. And she was railroaded. You're absolutely correct.
Well, and like I say, it's not that she didn't do anything. I mean, she did beat the crap out of that.
Yeah, she was a bad person. Don't get me wrong, but she did not murder the people that she claims. I mean, they now put the serial killer tag on her. How the hell did she get that?
Well, they claim she killed over 100 people when she didn't even kill one. She beat up somebody, but she never killed one single person.
Interesting.
And now they call her a serial killer that killed over 100 people.
Well, and kind of jumping around a little bit, because it made me think of this when I read your area about Waverly Hills, the amount of people that has been popularly suggested died at Waverly versus what you found. They couldn't be any further apart in numbers.
Okay, what are they? Okay, Shannon, Waverly Hills. And I know this may be a sore subject for a few folks out there. Shannon Bradley Byers is the author of the book. These are her opinions expressed, not necessarily... No, I'm kidding, of course.
No, don't you...
How many people?
Don't you dare say it.
I won't do that to you. Don't worry. How many people do they claim died at Waverly? The popular theory.
Depending on what you watch, it's either over 63 or 63,000 or over 60,000.
How many?
One of the two.
How many really died?
Between 5,000 and 6,000.
Wow, that's a huge discrepancy.
And what I
that's 60,000 people different.
And what I like about what you're doing throughout the whole book, because a lot of times you have your text that you're putting down the facts and stuff, but you are including official documents that you have found and including that. And there's a lot of stuff about all of these. And Waverly, there's a lot of it about how you're looking at that whole area, how many people have died, and just not hitting that amount as what they're saying for just Waverly.
I mean, you've got the Booth brothers who did Spooked.
Mm-hmm.
And, their opening thing says, and I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head because sometimes I get these numbers confused, but, they give you multiple thousands died when not even that many people in the county died. And that's one reason I include that in the book.
Yeah.
Is so you can see. And, a lot of people will say, well, why can't you give a definite number? Well, you have to consider with what Pam and I did, we actually sat and went through all the death certificates for Kentucky from 1910 to 1961, which is when, Waverly was open. The original hospital opened in 1910.
Mm-hmm.
The new one was built in 1926, and then it closed in 1961. And we went through 50 years of death certificates. Now, we may have missed some, so we say between 5,000 and 6,000 to give a margin of error. I don't think the margin of error is that big, but I was being generous. If you there was a doctor that worked there, Dr. Frank Stewart, and he wrote an autobiography, and he tells you that the 2 years with the highest deaths were the year before World War II ended and the year the war ended. And I think that it was 162 died that year, each year of those 2 years. Even if you took 162 and multiplied it by 50, you don't come up with 60,000.
That's a lot of people. I mean, that is more people that allegedly died at Waverly Hills than died during the Vietnam War.
Yeah. I mean, 162 times 50, 162 times 50 would give you 8,000 deaths.
Yeah.
And you can see, because Greg, if you're still looking at the book, you can see I give you the numbers of each year. And the numbers that are in there came from financial reports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then our death certificate count. Because I've, actually downloaded all these death certificates, and I've got copies of all of them.
Wow. I mean, you really dove into doing this book. It was not well, let's do a book and we'll try to get some information, but you really dug deep. You weren't satisfied till you were at the very bottom of the info.
Well, yeah, because if I'm going to sit and tell you that somebody's lying, I'm going to have that proof in my hand.
Touche. I totally get you where you're coming from. Now, here's what happens to me now, and I can only speak for me. I'm a bit of a media person, okay? So when I show up at a place that has some fame or some notoriety behind it, the story automatically becomes bigger. And I always show up armed with facts and figures and understanding what the real story is. And I don't think they mean to do this. I don't think the people that are owning or operating it mean to inflate the story. I really don't believe that. But I think what they do is they like the awe and shock factor. And they want to be more impressive than the last place we were at. And so there could be some of that going on. But 60,000? I mean, my Lord. That is a huge number of people dead. I mean, that's more than the Vietnam War.
The thing is that takes away from, in my opinion, Waverly was a state-of-the-art hospital.
Yeah.
They were doing things and curing people that no other tuberculosis hospital was doing at the time.
Yeah.
And that's not what people focus on. They don't want to focus on the people they saved.
You're right. Absolutely correct.
On the people who got carried down the death chute.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely correct. It seems that...
Which,
yeah.
You have to keep in mind, they quit using that tunnel to carry people before 1945.
Yeah. Yeah. So it has not been in operation a very long time. And if you read some of the stuff out there, they make it sound like it was an operation to the day it closed, which is not factual. The death chute, the death tunnel, whatever you want to call it, was actually defunct long before then.
Well, yeah, because, they did use it because, the purpose in them using it was because the other patients were understandably getting depressed by seeing people they had become friends with because, like I point out in the book, they had their own social clubs. They had their own contests. They were family when they were in that hospital.
Yeah.
And so when one of their friends died, it was depressing to see them taken out the front door. So that's why they started using the supply tunnel. It's not built to do this. It was a supply tunnel. And, then when the cable broke and that poor person shot 500 feet down that tunnel and came out the other end, they decided, well, maybe this isn't a good idea. We're not going to do this anymore. And that was before 1945.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The name is Shannon Bradley Byers, and the book is Paranormal Fakelore, Nevermore. Check it out on Amazon. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about a few more things. Be back in 2 minutes, almost 3 minutes. Don't go anywhere. More Shannon. We come back right after this. You're listening to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teams, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
In 1999, The Exorcist was voted the scariest movie of all time.
Your daughter doesn't say she's a demon. She says she's the devil himself.
Entertainment Weekly calls it the most viscerally harrowing movie ever made.
That thing upstairs isn't my daughter.
The most electrifying movie of the 20th century is now coming back to theaters.
Where's Reagan?
In here with us.
Author William Peter Blatty and director William Friedkin have created an expanded, thrilling new version of The Exorcist with footage that has never been seen before.
She needs a priest.
I cast you out! Don't miss The Exorcist in the version you've never seen. Possessing theaters everywhere. Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
You're listening to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
Welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody, and we're having a great discussion with the one and only Shannon Bradley Byers. I always forget that darn S at the end of that once in a while, so I do apologize. Shannon Bradley Byers, and she is, of course, the author of this cool new book that we've been discussing all night. That's Paranormal Fakelore, Nevermore. And we're blowing the lid off a lot of these places, but we're only touching the surface because there are a lot of other locations in the book that we haven't even touched on, and more information we haven't even touched on. You can get your copy of this great book over there at Amazon.com. Grab it, and more importantly, or I guess not more importantly, but also leave a review and let people know how much you like the book. And make sure that you let Shannon know, hey, we like what you're doing. And she also has another good one out there that I really enjoyed, How Not to Be a Paranormal Investigator, or Ghost Hunter, rather. How Not to Be a Ghost Hunter. I call Paranormal Investigator because when you and I talk, there is a distinct difference between a Paranormal Investigator and a Ghost Hunter, by the way. So those two things will be discussed in that book as well. So pick them both up while you're at it, and it'll be good reads. Now, we are going to shift gears here to a really well-known story that's modern times, that is almost, if not a little bit better known at this point in time than the Exorcist story, and that would be the Bathsheba Thayer Sherman story, which, of course, she is the witch depicted in the original Conjuring movie. And now we have had Andrea Perrin on the show, full disclosure, and we did talk about her time in the house. We did talk about the events, and even she says, and I know I'm not talking out of school because this is exactly what she said, the movie didn't get it right. That it was way off the mark, that a lot of the things that did happen, that they depict did not happen, not defending her, not being on her side or their side or anyone's side. Just want to throw that out there. Now we're going to get Shannon's side. Tell us what you believe, what you think was going on in that whole story.
This is always such a tricky subject. Again, I'm going to preface this by saying I never say these locations are not haunted. Mm-hmm. My purpose is to point out that the people that are being accused of haunting the place are the wrong people. Okay? The house in Harrisville has been there forever. Mm-hmm. There were people that died there over hundreds of years.
Sure.
The facts that I have seen, and I've read all 3 books, and I've seen the movie, and you'll notice in the book, I debunk the movie, and I debunk certain things in the books that could not have happened.
Yep.
You know, one thing that's always pointed out in the books is, and again, you know, the author is going off memory of things that happened in the 70s. She's saying she's attributing things to her mother, such as this research that her mother had supposedly done that got handed over to the Warrens that mysteriously disappeared, so there's no backup to this. But, you know, one thing out of the gate is that they say that Bathsheba murdered this child, you know, by sticking some kind of needle, sharp object in the child's head, and that, you know, the inquest and the court, you know, all that stuff had to be done in Chepachet because Burrville wasn't a town yet. That's total bullcrap. Mm-hmm. If you look at the history, Burrville was most definitely a town at the time they attribute that Bathsheba supposedly killed this child. Mm-hmm. So there would have been no, and they had their own town, they had their own court, there would be no reason for court to be going on in Chepachet.
Okay? Gotcha.
The town had been I think somewhere in the book, or interviews, you know, and I state in the book that I have read or heard every single interview out there since the books and the movie came out. Mm-hmm. And I feel fairly confident in saying that. If there's one out there that I haven't heard, it might be one. Mm-hmm. But, you know, they say she was an older teenager when this happened. Well, Burrville would have been in town for 26 years by the time she supposedly killed this child.
Yeah.
And that's just the start. You know, poor Bathsheba never did anything to anybody.
You know, I'm reading.
She was born. Her daddy died in her will, which I include in the book.
Yep.
You know, her daddy left her a room, and this is what is so sad to me, the state of affairs. He had to state in the will that she could pass in and out of the house into that room with a fireplace, unmolested.
Yeah, that part was really interesting to me, too.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and then you've got people who supposedly committed suicide that, if you look at the Black Book and you look at the death records, these people that died, but they died way far away. They were nowhere near the property.
Mm-hmm.
The poor girl that they say, Prudence Arnold, that was murdered in the pantry, was murdered over the state line in a foster parent's home. It's just all these things that they attribute.
Be dying in her care. Was that
true? There is absolutely no record of any child dying in that way in the history of that area. And it has been looked into to see if maybe a child died that didn't have anything to do with her. It was 50 years before or 50 years after. There is no death like that reported whatsoever.
When I'm reading the text about it, and they claim that it was a penetrated skull, and then she was Bathsheba, sorry about that, was eventually was arrested for the murder.
According to research that the author's mother had done, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what does your own research bring to bear? Was she ever arrested for that murder?
No, there is no record of that.
So, like you said, there's no baby that died any way, any form, any fashion in that home, in her care, any time.
She
not even in that home, not in the entire state.
Gotcha.
It didn't happen.
Gotcha.
And she wasn't arrested for anything ever, right?
Correct. She was a member of the Baptist Church.
Well,
yeah?
But then they also, the society at the time believed the boy's death was a part of activities of her part, she allegedly sacrificed him. This is the murmur that I've heard and I've read from other people retelling the tale. See, she sacrificed him to Satan or something related to magic.
Nope.
So she was railroaded. I mean, history has railroaded this woman.
Well, history, yes. People are railroading her. You go back and you read newspaper articles, which, when I sit down and read newspapers, I read, the entire editions for decades on this stuff. Just, because the way newspapers were back then, you might have 2 sentences in the middle of a 20-page edition that might say something about somebody.
Okay. I know I sound like a broken record. I know I've already said this. But if you could find this info, why couldn't they?
They can.
No,
they
but why?
Try.
Why have you ever read an explanation anywhere in any text, anything of why she was chosen to be railroaded and be called a witch?
You'd have to ask Lorraine Warren that, because Lorraine Warren is the one that did that, according to the author of those books.
So it's not from her mother, but perpetrated from Lorraine and Ed?
As far as Bathsheba goes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So they, as in the Warrens, and again, this is just all speculative. I mean, and nothing against the Warrens. I've talked to Lorraine on several occasions. I knew Ed Warren. He always seemed to be a nice person to me. But what I'm saying is, why? I mean, I get it. I kind of want to get it, but at the same time, it's like, if this never even happened, okay, but why did not the family know? No, why did not the parents on their own?
You could ask the same thing about Amityville. You could ask the same thing about several cases that they were involved in.
Exactly. Exactly. And we're on this thin ice here. We really are here. We don't want to shatter through the ice, okay? Because, the Warrens are very looked up to, even to this day. And again, as far as
some people,
by some people, but they do have a fairly substantial fan base, and of course, big enough fan base to make the Conjuring movies. But you're absolutely correct. Some of their stuff. Now, this is not the first case. I did talk to Lionel Fairplay, and you know him from the movie, and he's a real person. You can talk to him yourself. With the case in England, the Enfield case. He told me out of his own mouth that the Warrens were at the Enfield house a whopping 12 hours, and Ed had mentioned to him, allegedly, I cannot stress this enough, allegedly said, you can make some real money off of this.
Yep. I've heard him say that. That's why I'm saying you can say why about a lot of their cases, and that's not a question I can answer.
Yeah.
Lorraine's the only one who can answer that.
And we say here, when we look at this poor lady, and Greg, you know, you and I are both students of history. We really are. You with Minnesota Ghost Box, definitely, because, I mean, it's always, and if you haven't checked that out, Shannon, I'd love you to check out Minnesota Ghost Box. They do their due diligence and try to do exactly what you do and get to the heart of the matter, what the real heart of the matter is. But that being said,
and you know, I do want to say I'm not the only person who looks at history.
No,
I'm just the only person willing to get in everybody's face about it.
Exactly, you're the only one that I know of. I mean, there's always people in the background going, "Yeah, but this is the real story." But you didn't hear it from me. This is the real story. I get that, but you're willing to, and I really, I respect you immensely for that. For putting your thoughts on paper for the world to see. But again,
it's not my thought.
But you do it though. I was just about to say, but again, you bring everything to the forefront with knowledge and with, you know, this is the black and white. You want to read it for yourself? Read it for yourself. So you're not using you're not really speculating here. You have actual facts and you have documentation. And so that's what sets you apart from a lot of the other things I've heard come from other people speculating what the real truth was.
Has anybody from, like Andrew or anyone else contacted you about anything that you've written about Bathsheba?
No, and Bathsheba was that case is new for the book. It was not on my website.
I was wondering about that. Okay.
Yeah, Bathsheba and the Myrtles were the two new ones that never made it to the website.
Mm-hmm.
I kept those for the book.
Bathsheba, she died at 73 years old, am I correct? In May 25th, 1885, if I'm not mistaken?
Yep. She had a stroke.
Okay, so, yeah. I'm looking at the whole thing as a whole, and there's a lot of fiction, a lot of liberties taken, using her name to make her into the enemy, and not just her, but other people in the book. And I really encourage people to pick up the book. Of course, you can get that over at Amazon.com. Paranormal Fakelore. Nevermore.
Well, you know, the thing is with Bathsheba, the thing that breaks my heart about her, you know, people, you know, they're desecrating her grave.
Yeah,
they completely tore it up. And when they removed hers, somebody finally succeeded in breaking it into 3 pieces last September. And so they took the whole thing up to fix it and restore it. Mm-hmm. And they hadn't put it back yet. And, you know, some people were taking this so seriously when they went to the graveyard to do whatever they were going to do to Bathsheba's grave. Since her stone wasn't there, they vandalized her husband's.
You know,
and tore it into pieces.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the great...
And then you've got poor Norma.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the stories I heard, and this is pretty sensational, is Bathsheba became, when she died, allegedly, she became stone. She was turned into stone.
She had a stroke. She was paralyzed. And you have to consider, they didn't... Rhode Island wasn't issuing death certificates then, so there's no official death record that anybody could have seen to see that notation.
Gotcha.
Well, and you also bring up the fact, because you talk about how the person who currently owns the Exorcist house in St. Louis kind of like What are their motives a little bit? But the other flip side of the coin is what's going on to the people that currently own the house where the whole conjuring thing has taken place. And that's a totally different side effect, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, their life has been made to live in hell because of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I actually called them. I talked to them for about half hour on the phone.
So you're part of the problem.
No, actually they vented to me. And I mentioned, hey, I'm part of the media, but I'm not here to bother you about The Conjuring. I'm more interested in, you know, what's going on with the media circus and whether you'd like to speak out. And, of course, they declined. They politely declined to speak out. Evidently, they do have a lawyer, and he does speak out on their behalf. But their life has been turned into a living hell. They got people trespassing on their property on a daily basis, they were telling me.
24/7.
To the point to where they had to install really a extensive and a complete camera operation to pretty much canvass their entire property.
And you know how big that property is?
It's a big property.
Yeah.
And
and they, thankfully they had other paranormal teams that stepped in and tried to, work security to help them out. They did have people to try to help them, but they should have never been in that position in the first place. It's like I say in the book, when they did that episode of Ghost Hunters, way back when Ghost Hunters first started, all Ghost Hunters ever said was this is a house in Harrisville that the Warrens were involved with. That's as far as they went because they had John Zappis on that episode and all that stuff. And, even, she tells you how that was edited to make it look like she was a believer, and she's never been a believer. She's a science person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we've heard that time and time again. We've had people on TV that edited version is not necessarily the actual events that went on during the filming. But you're right. I mean, the Warrens, now, if we're going to talk about that case, we have to talk about the Warrens again and touch on it. They made a lot of money on that case through the writings, through books. And they made a lot of money through speeches talking about this case. It would behoove them to keep that. I'm not saying they did this, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone didn't do this. Keep her name bad. I'm talking about Bathsheba's, to sell more books and to make it more sensational. Because if the real story about this poor lady came out, well, they're kind of sunk, aren't they?
Well, yeah. But I still don't get it. I mean, you will never be able to explain to me why she was picked to be maligned.
Honestly?
One, she never lived in that house. She never worked there. Her husband had their own farm. And if you look at the map in the book, it shows where all the different people lived. She, I think the closest she might have come to scandal is, and it wasn't even her, when Prudence Arnold was murdered. And, she did have her throat slit. It was a brutal murder. And one of the people implicated in the early days of the proceedings was Bathsheba's brother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then they cleared him. So that's really the closest that poor woman ever came to scandal.
You know what I think it really comes down to, and it sounds very silly. I don't know one way or the other, but I have a feeling it comes down to her name. Just it's enough to be just enough to be like, this is the type of name that we could associate with this type of person we're creating.
But why? I mean, what did this poor woman ever do to anybody?
Yeah, well, I don't think people care about that sort of thing, obviously.
Well, just like the other people in the book, there's people attributed to death, that either happened definitely somewhere else or didn't happen the way they said. Or, you will never be able to explain to me why people take dead people and make up stories about them other than the fact that they're not around to defend themselves. And you're talking about a time where, you've got to dig through those records to be able to prove what did or did not happen. And you guys know, most people are not going to do that. They're going to take what you tell them at face value.
Yeah.
Well, they're
going to assume you did the research.
That's where that based on a true story tag really comes in handy.
Well, yeah. But what true story is it based on?
Good question. Good question.
Because even Andrea says herself that the movie got it wrong.
Yeah.
So basically all they did was make a movie that had the family names and the Warrens and a haunted house.
Well, I mean,
look
at the Enfield case. I don't mean to cut you off, but look at the newest Conjuring. Oh, my God. It is way off the mark. The Warrens weren't even involved barely. And here they have a feature link to them not only helping the family, but doing home improvements with them. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I laughed all the way through that one.
Interesting. Well, and the Warrens weren't that. I mean, they were pushed out of the parents' house at one point too, right? I mean, they after a séance that didn't go well.
That is what it stated in the books. Yes. Now, we've only got that version of it, to know. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not something I can prove or disprove. And, if it did, if something wonky went on, and, I probably would have punched him too and sent him out of the house. But, you've got to consider all these kids were young.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this stuff is going on either, memory or my mother said, or, so it's all hearsay. It can't be proven or disproven. The only thing that can be proven is that, John Arnold committed suicide way away from the farm, wasn't anywhere near it. He did commit suicide, and he did do it by insecticide poisoning, but he didn't do it on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up on the farm, but he didn't do it on the farm. The old lady that they talk about that hung herself in the barn, that never happened ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the entire history of the town. So what I'm arguing against are these quote unquote facts that never happened. And if you're going to put out all these facts that didn't happen, that's going to make a logical person question everything else you say.
Very true.
This isn't true. How do I know that this is true?
Yeah.
If I can't believe you on this, how do I believe you on that?
Yeah, because, I've done a lot of case study in paranormal cases. Enfield Poltergeist for a long time was one of my favorite ones to read up on because it was so published over the seas at the time. Hell, even the police were involved going, what the hell is going on? Mm-hmm. And so when I saw the movie, and of course I kind of took it with a giant grain of salt, and when I was approached by, well, what do you think of the movie? And I said, it is a wonderful work of fiction. And that's really what it was in a lot of ways. It was a work of fiction. Now, that could also be said for the Parent Story. That could be said for a lot of these movies. You got to understand that these are movies, though. I'm devil's advocate really quick. These are movies. These are made to entertain. They're not made to inform. They're made to entertain.
Well, and, it's like I say in the book. The movie I can forgive because it's a movie.
Yep.
But I'm still going to tell you what the movie, said
exactly.
Really didn't happen.
Exactly, but they got their...
I don't want Bathsheba malign.
Exactly, and they got their facts somewhere, somehow, some way. They got their facts because they had to get them from somewhere because I'm sure that they didn't do the research.
Well, it's my understanding she helped write... She helped. I don't think she wrote the screenplays, and I think I read somewhere recently that she is writing her own screenplays for the 3 books. But it's my understanding from things that I have read is that some of that information came from her for the movie.
Well, you know what? I just glanced at time. We're already at the end of another show. Wow, does that ever fly? The book is Paranormal Fakelore, Nevermore, Real Histories of Haunted Locations. The author is Shannon Bradley Byers. You can go over there to Amazon, buy the book, check it out, get her other works she has out there. How Not to Be a Ghost Hunter as well is very, very good stuff. You're going to love it, and maybe, you're going to see behind it. and we really like talking to you, Shannon. You know, you're busting the myths of history. So keep up the good work.
And if you want to come get in my face, I will be a guest at Scarefest in Lexington, Kentucky at the end of September.
Exactly. She will be at Scarefest. You can meet her, talk to her, maybe even say, I don't believe a word you're saying, and she'll have the documentation back it up. So, but until next time, take care of each other, love each other, and read the books, and see you guys next time. Thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter.